Hi, you guys. Whoa. I'm a little bit nervous, and it's nice to see all your familiar and friendly faces. You guys are smiling. You see, I'm here today speaking from a personal experience that I never imagined would become part of my personal story. Just because we are drinking kombucha and meditating doesn't make us exempt from illness, disease, cancer. My favorite flavor is gingerade. I meditate every morning, and I developed cancer. So today, I am here to shine a light in a dark corner and really let you all know that your role as leaders in the wellness movement is far greater than I think you realize. It was July 7th, 2016, that's just 14 months ago. I was diagnosed with stage 3 rectal cancer. It was just a couple months prior to that I had acquired new health insurance, and with that, a requirement to identify a GP, a general practitioner. Well, I didn't have one because I hadn't been for a checkup in years. So I asked around, I did some research, I made an appointment, I went to see the doctor. She took a complete history, which included a history of some gastro issues. She did a pelvic exam, she drew blood. And a week after that appointment, she called me and said, "Lisa, the labs are back, and you're quite anemic. And with a history of gastro issues, I want you to go see a gastroenterologist. Here's a recommendation." I made a referral. So I made the appointment. And I went. When I arrived, I was brought into the doctor's office, and while I was waiting for him, I sat down observing all the diplomas on the wall, and when he arrived, I laughed at myself because he reminded me of Doogie Howser. Do you guys remember Doogie Howser? He was this child genius doctor. It was a sitcom in the 80s. It was Neil Patrick Harris. So he also took a complete history, and he asked me a ton of questions, and I asked him a ton of questions, and he said to me, instead of doing a physical exam, I want you to come in for a colonoscopy. And I said, "Oh, doc, that's going to have to wait till September because it's the beginning of summer, and I've got hiking and biking and mountains and oceans on my mind. There's no room for medical procedures." And he said, "No problem, we'll fit you in on Thursday." So I almost canceled that appointment, but I showed up. And now when you go for a colonoscopy, it's required that an escort, an adult, signs you out because there's sedation involved. So when I woke up from the procedure, as soon as my escort arrived, my dear friend Shandy, we were ushered into a conference room, and trailing right behind us was the doctor, and in his hands were a handful of papers he was shuffling around. And he showed me imaging from the procedure, the healthy portions of my colon, and he shuffled around the papers again and zeroed in on one image, and he said, "This is a tumor in your rectum, it's cancer." He went on to say that I needed to go for a CAT scan immediately. His office was in the process of arranging it. He instructed my friend to take notes, gave us the name and number of an oncologist and a surgeon, and said, "You need to make appointments immediately. They'll be expecting your call." So Shandy helped me gather my things, and we rode down the elevator, spit out into a busy Manhattan sidewalk, and I looked at her and I said, "Did Doogie Howser just tell me I have colon cancer?" And she looked at me and she said, "No, it's rectal cancer, and I think it's important that you're specific. We're gonna go somewhere quiet right now and make these phone calls." So I was in shock, right? That's understandable. I was in denial. That lasted for a while, but I was in the state of total disbelief. How could I have cancer, right? I'm healthy yoga girl. It didn't make any sense to me. Most of my lifestyle choices are really informed by preventative concepts. So for example, I carry around a stainless steel water bottle and I have for years, because the idea of drinking my water out of a plastic bottle that could be leaching carcinogens into my water is ridiculous, right? But there's a whole list of stuff that's part of my daily activities, kind of informed by the same info. So there's a statistic we're all quite familiar with, or some variation of, and that is 80% of all cancers are caused by poor lifestyle choices. well, like, where did that leave me, right? I'm like 98% healthy choices. So I got really curious about kind of like that statistic and my mindset and what was going on. And in preparing to come here today, I made some phone calls, I talked to some experts, and the feedback I received is that really who, when will get cancer is really determined by many factors, some of them lifestyle, but many other factors that are completely out of our control. And it's impossible for anyone to completely protect themselves. So I'm like, okay, I processed that, but there were other things going on related to my mindset. So I had some pretty intense judgments about the Western medical system. And I'm looking around the room and wondering if anyone else can relate. Aside from that, I was living in this sort of power paradigm where things were like good or bad or pretty or ugly or healthy or sick or wellness or illness. So if I was all like column A, like healthy wellness, how could I even imagine there'd be some illness or disease? To take it to kind of another level, since I have your attention, I realized I was doing something quite dangerous prior to my diagnosis. I presented symptoms prior to my diagnosis, and I'm not going to go into the specifics, but I'll tell you they were related to slow digestion and constipation. And in retrospect, I realized what I was doing was using my wellness, my knowledge, my tools to treat those symptoms, right? So I did an elimination diet, I fermented foods, tried a dozen different probiotics. I saw an acupuncturist who sent me home with like bags of Chinese herbs. I read everything about gut health and microbiome and tried to, apply whatever I had access to. So I was using, right, this kind of like wellness toolbox to treat symptoms. And what is concerning about that mindset specifically is that, we're here today, we're hearing a lot about functional medicine, which is emerging as the kind of sister science to the wellness movement. And in that, there's a focus on investigating the root cause and bringing an individual back into balance. Well, I was like ass backwards, right? I was like using my wellness to treat symptoms, but I had no idea what the root cause was. Now, my mindset delayed my diagnosis, right? I mentioned stage 3 cancer. And progressive disease, by definition, is more difficult to treat. And this becomes part of the conversation, talking about treatment plan, but also survival statistics, right? Survival, like life or death kind of stuff. So for me, the stage 3 cancer was indicated by the fact that the tumor had penetrated the organ wall and that there were cancer cells found in at least one lymph node. So my understanding of lymph is that it's the transportation system in my body. So it's as if some cancer cells kind of hopped on the subway, headed uptown, right? Like maybe to my lungs, maybe to my liver. And should they get off the subway and set up camp in one of these organs and attach and grow, that's metastasized cancer. That's stage 4, right? There's like a whole new conversation about treatment and survival statistics. There is no stage 5. So, I want to back up for a minute before July 7th and just let you guys know where I was coming from. So, in my early 30s, I developed a really strong yoga practice, and I just turned 43. There's like a little reference for timing. And with time spent at the yoga studio, I developed a deep curiosity around all things related to yoga culture. So, nutrition, philosophy, movement, different concepts of self-care, and that eventually inspired to become certified as a yoga teacher. I became certified as a holistic health coach, right? So you guys are getting a sense of like where I was at while I was developing this cancer. Eventually that motivated a professional shift, and I went from producing photo shoots and events in the fashion world to dedicating my production skills and marketing knowledge to supporting health and wellness professionals. So I found myself in this kind of awesome place where my professional life and my social life and my inner life were really beautifully aligned, and the common thread was this desire to seek high vibe living, inspiring others to adopt healthy habits. Like I was really in it, right? I'm like studying with amazing teachers and meeting the individuals really shaping the movement. I'm actually at the dinner table with the individuals shaping the wellness revolution. So within all of that, something was missing, like something really big, and I want you guys to hear this. Where was my foundation of self-care, the fundamentals like you learn about in elementary school? Like going to the dentist regularly, an annual checkup with a doctor, annual pap smear, a full body scan with a dermatologist, self-breast check, right? That stuff just wasn't on my radar. It wasn't part of my practice. And here's the thing. That's where you have access to diagnostics, right? And diagnostics, that's what enables early detection. Early detection is, like our greatest tool against progressive disease, right? Do you get where I'm going here? So my perspective has changed, right? I have a new respect for science and medicine and technology. And that's kind of a big deal, but that's not the only way my perspective changed in this process. So what I thought was this lifestyle, this way of being in the world that was very strong and stable, it would protect me from any sort of illness and disease and just really strong and high vibe, I learned was really the training ground for what would prove to be an incredibly challenging time in my life. So when I was first diagnosed, I learned very quickly the type of cancer I developed was very curable and treatable with a standard of care, a protocol that included chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. This just completely challenged my belief system. The doctors talked about chemotherapy, I heard poison. They talked about radiation, I'm envisioning literally blasting collateral damage to the organs in my pelvis, right? So I had to kind of reconcile this in my mind, and I realized for me, deep down in my gut, that this cancer that was growing in my body was dark and mysterious and deceptive and adaptive, and something so destructive kind of made sense. So I embraced it. With knowledge of every alternative, I chose a treatment plan that included chemo, radiation, and surgery, not one, but two. And it was hard, right? Chemotherapy sucks. I'm not going to go into it. I don't even have the language to talk about it, but it felt like I was being poisoned. So I had this team of doctors that were laser focused on eliminating any cancer cells from my system and curing myself of this disease. Well, I created a circle of healers. I knew intuitively that I needed to calm my nervous system if I was going to find healing for my mind, body, and spirit in this process. So, I could go on the topic for hours, but I started working with an acupuncturist that specifically works with cancer patients. I worked with a functional medicine doctor that helped me with supplementation and advised me on nourishment, but also really acted as an advisor in helping me understand what was going on in my body. She also helped me kind of filter this incredible influx of information I was getting from every channel imaginable. I worked with an urban Zen therapist who came to my apartment on the days when I couldn't make it to the yoga studio. Sometimes he would just come and sit and breathe with me. And then there was the actual yoga studio, this place of community and where I could go and safely, move my body and all the things I learned there. So, not just the asana, the movement, but meditation, pranayama, mantra. It's where I learned about the chakra system, right? I developed a tumor in my root chakra. That deserves a little thinking about there. I began working with a psychotherapist. I was turned on to the idea that cancers developed from unprocessed emotions. And I went into this, really difficult process, incredibly healing. And there's a list of all these other healers I had in my environment. There's body workers and energy healers and clairvoyants and, I was surrounded myself with crystals in my apartment, and I was like drenching myself in all these essential oils with different healing properties. And I saw multiple shamans, right? Like, you can't ever have too many shamans. I started writing. I was journaling every evening as a way to process what was going on. I wrote poetry. I wrote an article for mindbodygreen. So here I found myself kind of dancing between these two worlds, and at times that was kind of challenging. But I want to tell you, I don't think I would be standing here today, like bright in my eyes, strong in my posture, if it wasn't for my ability to totally embrace both. There's this whole other aspect of like spirituality I knew about. I just kind of like skipped over, but like faith, compassion, hope, surrender. I was in this place of complete surrender. So I found, instead of being a victim of this terrible disease, I found myself an individual engaged in an incredibly transformative experience. So you guys are probably wondering, like, what's going on right now? My current status is no evidence of disease. Thank you. And I find myself totally committed in a whole different way to habits of healthy lifestyle. And my new perspective is influencing that, right? So I've got like all these great practices. For me now, it feels a bit more restorative, but I have access. I'm engaged in this process with a team of doctors. Again, right, it's like early detection, preventing reoccurrence. We're looking very closely to see that the cancer doesn't come back, right? So that means regular scans and blood work and colonoscopies, which are like a ton of fun. So, in April, when I was in the thick of it, I wrote an article for mindbodygreen about my experience, and I got some immediate feedback that it was really radical, and I'm like, I'm so not radical. Everyone in the office was kind of buzzing about it, and I realized it's because they saw themselves in me, right? And the danger, right? My judgments about the medical system, like, really, really got in my way. My wellness got in the way of my wellness, right? That's kind of scary. And I don't want that to happen to you guys. That's why I'm here today talking about it. So I want to throw out a couple of things for you guys to think about. When someone comes to you, a friend, a lover, a sister, a brother, a client, a patient, a student, a teacher, and they present an issue, right? How are you going to support them and motivate them to seek out a professional with access to diagnostic tools, right, to get to the root? How are you going to support them? So let's say they are diagnosed with something, right, and they participate in a treatment that might be in conflict with your belief system. How are you going to show up? There's a little bit of like shame and judgment involved. How do you get around that? My thought is an inclusivity. But I want to ask you, like, are you going to go to the hospital and sit and breathe with them? That's wellness in the context of illness, right? That's elevating our practice and our purpose. So I want to leave you with this. Respect the chakras, respect the science. It just might save your life. Thank you for your time.